Hello, if you like these videos, don't forget to push the like button, share them with your friends, and subscribe. Moon's cat is hiding somewhere in this video. If you find him, there's a prize. Out of the Silent Planet by C.S. Lewis. Part 7. Read for you today by Yuga. That night, Ransom slept in the guest house, which was a real house built by Triggy and richly decorated. His pleasure at finding himself in this respect under more human conditions was qualified by the discomfort which, despite his reason, he could not help feeling in the presence at close quarters of so many Malacandran creatures. All three species were represented. They seemed to have no uneasy feelings toward each other, though there were some differences of the kind that occur in a railway carriage on Earth, the Sorns finding the house too hot and the Triggy finding it too cold. He learned more of Malacandran humour and of the noises that expressed it in this one night than he had learned during the whole of his life on the strange planet hitherto. Indeed, nearly all Malacandran conversations by which he had yet taken part had been grave. Apparently, the comic spirit arose chiefly from the meeting of the different kinds of Hnau. The jokes of all three were equally incomprehensible to him. He thought he could see a difference in kind, as that the Sorns seldom got beyond irony, while the Oyarsa were extravagant and fantastic, and the Triggy were sharp and excelled in abuse. But even when he understood all the words, he could not see the points. He went early to bed. It was at the time of early morning when men on Earth go out to milk the cows that Ransom was wakened. At first he did not know what had roused him. The chamber in which he lay was silent, empty, and nearly dark. He was preparing himself to sleep again when a high-pitched voice close beside him said,
"Oyarsa sends for you."
He sat up, staring about him.
"Oyarsa sends for you,"
the voice repeated. The confusion of sleep was now cleared in his head, and he recognized that there was an Eldil in the room. He felt no conscious fear, but while he rose obediently and put on his clothes that he had laid aside, he found that his heart was beating rather fast. He was thinking less of the invisible creature in the room than of the interview that lay before him. His old terrors of meeting some monster or idol had quite left him. He felt nervous, as he remembered feeling on the morning of an examination when he was an undergraduate. More than anything in the world, he would have liked a good cup of tea. The guest house was empty. He went out. The bluish smoke was rising from the lake, and the sky was bright behind the jagged eastern wall of the canyon. It was a few minutes before sunrise. The air was still very cold, the ground weed drenched with dew, and there was something puzzling about the whole scene, which he presently identified with the silence. The Eldil voices in the air had ceased, and so had the shifting network of small lights and shades. Without being told, he knew that it was his business to go up to the crown of the island and the grove. As he approached them, he saw with a certain sinking of heart that the monolith avenue was full of Malacandran creatures, all silent. They were in two lines, one on each side, and all squatting or sitting in the various fashions suitable to their anatomies. He walked on slowly and doubtfully, not daring to stop, and ran the gauntlet of all those inhuman and unblinking eyes. When he had come to the very summit, at the middle of the avenue where the biggest of the stones rose, he stopped. He could never remember afterwards whether an Eldil voice had told him to do so, or whether it was an intuition of his own. He did not sit down, for the earth was too cold and wet, and he was not sure if it would be decorous. He simply stood, motionless, like a man on parade. All those creatures were looking at him, and there was no noise anywhere. He perceived gradually that the place was full of Eldila. The lights, or suggestions of light, which yesterday had been scattered over the island, were now all congregated in this one spot, and were all stationary or faintly moving. The sun had risen now, and still no one spoke. As he looked up to see the first pale sunlight upon the monoliths, he became conscious that the air above them was full of a far greater complexity of light than the sunrise could explain, and light of a different kind, Eldil light. The sky, no less than the earth, was full of them. The visible Malacandrians were but the smallest part of the silent consistory which surrounded him. He might, when the time came, be pleading his cause before thousands, or before millions. Rank behind rank about him, and rank above rank over his head, the creatures that had never yet seen man, and whom man could not see, were waiting for his trial to begin. He licked his lips, which were quite dry, and wondered if he would be able to speak when speech was demanded of him. Then it occurred to him that perhaps this waiting and being looked at was the trial. Perhaps even now he was unconsciously telling them all they wished to know. But afterwards, a long time afterwards, there was a noise of movement. Every visible creature in the grove had risen to its feet and was standing, more hushed than ever, with its head bowed, and Ransom saw, if it could be called seeing, that Oyarsa was coming up between the long lines of sculptured stones. Partly he knew it from the faces of the Malacandrians as their lord passed them. Partly he saw. He could not deny that he saw Oyarsa himself. He never could say what it was like. The merest whisper of light, no, less than light, the smallest diminution of shadow, was travelling along the uneven surface of the groundweed, or rather some difference in the look of the ground, too slight to be named in the languages of the five senses, moved slowly towards them, like a silence spreading over a room full of people, like an infinitesimal coolness on a sultry day, like a passing memory of some long-forgotten sound or scent, like all that is stillest and smallest and most hard to seize in nature. Oyarsa passed between his subjects and drew near and came to rest, not 10 yards away from Ransom, in the centre of Meldalorn. Ransom felt a tingling of his blood and a prickling on his fingers, as if lightning were near him, and his heart and body seemed to him to be made of water. Oyarsa spoke, a more unhuman voice than Ransom had yet heard, sweet and seemingly remote, an unshaken voice, a voice, as one of the Oyarsa afterwards said to Ransom, "with no blood in it."
Light is instead of blood for them.
The words were not alarming.
What are you so afraid of, Ransom of Thandra?
It said.
Of you, Oyarsa, because you are unlike me, and I cannot see you.
Those are not great reasons,
said the voice.
You are also unlike me, and though I see you very faintly. But do not think we are utterly unlike. We are both copies of Maladil. These are not real reasons.
Ransom said nothing.
You began to be afraid of me before you set foot in my world. And you have spent all your time since then in flying from me. My servants saw your fear when you were in your ship in heaven. They saw that your own kind treated you ill, though they could not understand their speech. Then, to deliver you out of the hands of those two, I stirred up a Hnakra, to try if you would come to me of your own will. But you hid among the Oyarsa, and though they told you to come to me, you would not. After that, I sent my Ildil to fetch you, but still you would not come. And in the end, your own kind have chased you to me, and Hnau's blood has been shed.
I do not understand, Oyarsa. Do you mean that it was you who sent for me from Thandra?
Yes. Did not the other two tell you this? And why did you come with them, unless you meant to obey my call? My servants could not understand their talk to you when your ship was in heaven.
Your servants? I cannot understand,
said Ransom.
Ask freely,
said the voice.
Have you servants out in the heavens?
Where else? There is nowhere else.
But you, Oyarsa, are here on Malacandra, as I am.
But Malacandra, like all worlds, floats in heaven, and I am not here altogether as you are, Ransom of Thandra. Creatures of your kind must drop out of heaven into a world. For us, the worlds are places in heaven. But do not try to understand this now. It is enough to know that I and my servants are even now in heaven. They were around you in the sky ship, no less than they were around you here.
Then you knew of our journey before we left Thandra?
No. Thandra is the world we do not know. It alone is outside the heaven, and no message comes from it.
Ransom was silent, but Oyarsa answered his unspoken questions.
It was not always so. Once we knew the Oyarsa of your world. He was brighter and greater than I. And then we did not call it Thandra, the silent world. It is the longest of all stories, and the bitterest. He became bent. That was before any life came on your world. Those were the bent years of which we still speak in the heavens. When he was not yet bound to Thandra, but free like us. It was in his mind to spoil other worlds besides his own. He smote your moon with his left hand, and with his right he brought the cold death on my Harandra before its time. If by my arm Meladil had not opened the Harandromids and let out the hot springs, my world would have been unpeopled. We did not leave him so large for long. There was great war, and we drove him back out of the heavens and bound him in the air of his own world, as Meladil taught us. There doubtless he lies to this hour, and we know no more of that planet. It is silent. We think that Meladil would not give up so utterly to the Bent One. And there are stories among us that he has taken strange counsel and dared terrible things, wrestling with the Bent One in Thandra. But of this we know less than you. It is a thing we desire to look into.
It was some time before Ransom spoke again, and Oyarsa respected his silence. When he had collected himself, he said,
After this story, Oyarsa, I may tell you that our world is very bent. The two who brought me knew nothing of you, but only that the Sorns had asked for me. They thought you were a false Eldil, I think. There are false Ildilla in the wild parts of our world. Men kill other men before them. They think the Eldil drinks blood. They thought the Sorns wanted me for this, or for some other evil. They brought me by force. I was in terrible fear. The tellers of tales in our world make us think that if there is any life beyond our own air, it is evil.
I understand,
said the voice.
And this explains things that I have wondered at. As soon as your journey had passed your own air and entered heaven, my servants told me that you seemed to be coming unwillingly, and that the others had secrets from you. I did not think any creature would be so bent as to bring another of its own kind here by force.
They did not know what you wanted me for, Oyarsa. Nor do I know yet.
I will tell you. 2 years ago, and that is about 4 of your years, this ship entered the heavens from your world. We followed its journey all the way hither, and Ildilla were with it, as it sailed over the Harandra, and when, at last, it came to rest in the Harandramid, more than half my servants were standing round it to see the strangers come out. All beasts we kept back from the place, and no Hanau yet knew of it. When the strangers had walked to and fro on Malacandra, and made themselves a hut, and their fear of the new world ought to have worn off, I sent certain Sorns to show themselves, and teach the strangers our language. I chose Sorns because they are most like your people in form. The Thalkandrians feared the Sorns and were very unteachable. The Sorns went to them many times and taught them a little. They reported to me that the Thalkandrians were taking sun's blood wherever they could find it in the streams. When I could make nothing of them by report, I told the Sorns to bring them to me, not by force but with courtesy. They would not come. I asked for one of them, but not even one of them would come. It would have been easy to take them, but though we saw that they were stupid, we did not know yet how bent they were, and I did not wish to stretch my authority beyond the creatures of my own world. I told the Sorns to treat them like cubs, to tell them that they would be allowed to pick up no more of the sun's blood, until one of their race came to me. When they were told this, they stuffed as much as they could into the skyship and went back to their own world. We wondered at this, and now it is plain. They thought I wanted one of your race to eat and went to fetch one. If they had come a few miles to see me, I would have received them honorably. Now they have twice gone a voyage of millions of miles for nothing, and will appear before me nonetheless. And you also, Ransom of Thandra, you have taken many vain troubles to avoid standing where you stand now.
That is true, Oyarsa. Bent creatures are full of fears. But I am here now, and I am ready to know your will with me.
2 things I want to ask of your race. First, I must know why you come here. So much is my duty to my world. And secondly, I wish to hear of Thandra, and of Maladil's strange wars there with the Bent One. For that, as I have said, is a thing we desire to look into.
The first question, Oyarsa, I have come here because I was brought. Of the others, one cares for nothing but the sun's blood, because in our world he can exchange it for many pleasures and powers. But the other means evil to you. I think he would destroy all your people to make room for our people. And then he would do the same with other worlds again. He wants our race to last for always, I think. And he hopes they will leap from world to world, always going to a new sun when an old one dies, or something like that.
Is he wounded in the brain?
I do not know. Perhaps I do not describe his thoughts right. He is more learned than I.
Does he think he could go to the great worlds? Does he think Maladil wants a race to live forever?
He does not know there is any Maladil. But what is certain, Oyarsa, is that he means evil to your world. Our kind must not be allowed to come here again. If you can prevent it only by killing all 3 of us, I am content.
If you were my own people, I would kill them now, Ransom. And you soon, for they are bent beyond hope. And you, when you have grown a little braver, will be ready to go to Maladil. But my authority is over my own world. It is a terrible thing to kill someone else's now. It will not be necessary.
They are strong, Oyarsa. They can throw death many miles, and they can blow killing airs at their enemies.
The least of my servants could touch their ship before it reached Malacandra, while it was in the heaven, and make it a body of different movements. For you, no body at all. Be sure that no one of your race will come into my world again unless I call him. But enough of this. Now, tell me of Thandra. Tell me all. We know nothing since the day when the Bent One sank out of heaven into the air of your world, wounded in the very light of his light. But why have you become afraid again?
I'm afraid of the lengths of time, Oyarsa. Or perhaps I do not understand. Did you not say this happened before there was life on Thandra?
Yes.
And you, Oyarsa? You have lived? And that picture on the stone where the cold is killing them on the Harandra? Is that a picture of something that was before my world began?
I see. You are now, after all, said the voice. Doubtless no stone that faced the air then would be a stone now. The picture has begun to crumble away, and has been copied again more times than there are El Dilla in the air above us. But it was copied right. In that way, you were seeing a picture that was finished when your world was still half made. Do not think of these things. My people have a law never to speak much of sizes or numbers to you others, not even to Sorns. You do not understand, and it makes you do reverence to nothings, and pass by what is really great. Rather tell me what Maladil has done in Thalcandra.
According to our traditions,
Ransom was beginning, when an unexpected disturbance broke in upon the solemn stillness of the assembly. A large party, almost a procession, was approaching the grove from the direction of the ferry. It consisted entirely, so far as he could see, of Oyarsa. They appeared to be carrying something. As the procession drew nearer, Ransom saw that the foremost Oyarsa were supporting 3 long and narrow burdens. They carried them on their heads, 4 Oyarsa to each. After these came a number of others armed with harpoons and apparently guarding 2 creatures which he did not recognize. The light was behind them as they entered between the 2 farthest monoliths. They were much shorter than any animal that he had seen on Malacandra, and he gathered that they were bipeds, though the lower limbs were so thick and sausage-like that he hesitated to call them legs. Their bodies were a little narrower at the top than at the bottom, so as to be slightly pear-shaped, and their heads were neither round like the Oyarsa, nor like those of the Sorns, but almost square. They stumped along on narrow, heavy-looking feet, which they seemed to press into the ground with unnecessary violence, and now their faces were becoming visible as masses of lumped and puckered flesh of variegated color, fringed in some bristly dark substance. Suddenly, with an indescribable change of feeling, he realized that he was looking at men. The 2 prisoners were Weston and Divine, and he, for one privileged moment, had seen the human form with almost Malacandran eyes. The leaders of the procession had now advanced to within a few yards of Oyarsa and laid down their burdens. These he now saw were 3 dead Oyarsa, laid on biers of some unknown metal. They were on their backs, and their eyes, not closed as we close the eyes of human dead, stared disconcertedly up at the far-off golden canopy of the grove. One of them he took to be Hyoy, and it was certainly Hyoy's brother, Hiyehi, who now came forward, and after an obeisance to Oyarsa began to speak. Ransom at first did not hear what he was saying, for his attention was concentrated on Weston and Divine. They were weaponless and vigilantly guarded by the armed Oyarsa about them. Both of them, like Ransom himself, had let their beards grow since they had landed on Malacandra, and both were pale and travel-stained. Weston was standing with folded arms, and his face wore a fixed, even an elaborate expression of desperation. Divine, with his hands in his pockets, seemed to be in a state of furious sulks. Both clearly thought that they had good reason to fear, though neither was by any means lacking in courage. Surrounded by their guards as they were, and intent on the scene before them, they had not yet noticed Ransom. He became aware of what Hyoy's brother was saying.
For the death of these 2 Oyarsa, I do not so much complain. For when we fell upon the Hamana by night, they were in terror. You may say it was as a hunt, and these two were killed as they might have been by a Hanachra. But Yoy, they hit from afar with a coward's weapon, when he had done nothing to frighten them. And now he lies there, and I do not say it because he was my brother, but all the Harandramit knows it. And he was a Hanakrapunt, and a great poet, and the loss of him is heavy.
The voice of Oyarsa spoke for the first time to the two men.
Why have you killed my Hanau?
It said. Weston and Divine looked anxiously about them to identify the speaker.
God!
Exclaimed Divine in English.
Don't tell me they've got a loudspeaker.
Ventriloquism,
Replied Weston in a husky whisper.
quite common among savages. The witch doctor or medicine man pretends to go in a trance, and he does it. The thing is to identify the medicine man and address your remarks to him whenever the voice seems to come from. It shatters his nerves and shows that you've seen through him. Do you see any of the brutes in a trance? By Jove, I've spotted him.
Due credit must be given to Weston for his powers of observation. He had picked out the only creature in the assembly which was not standing in an attitude of reverence and attention. This was an elderly horse close beside him. It was squatting, and its eyes were shut. Taking a step towards it, he struck a defiant attitude and exclaimed in a loud voice. His knowledge of the language was elementary.
Why you take our puff bangs away? We very angry with you. We not afraid.
On Weston's hypothesis, his actions ought to have been impressive. Unfortunately for him, no one else shared his theory of the elderly Hross's behavior. The Hross, who was well known to all of them, including Ransom, had not come with a funeral procession. It had been in the place since dawn. Doubtless it intended no disrespect to Oyarsa, but it must be confessed that it had yielded at a much earlier stage in the proceedings to an infirmity which attacks elderly Hnau of all species, and was by this time enjoying a profound and refreshing slumber. One of its whiskers twitched a little as Weston shouted in its face, but its eyes remained shut. The voice of Oyarsa spoke again.
Why do you speak to him?
It said.
It is I who ask you. Why have you killed my Hnau?
You let us go, then we talky,
Bellowed Weston at the sleeping Hross.
You think we know power? You think you do all you like? You know Can, great big headman in the sky, he sent us. You know do what I say, he come, blow you all up, poof, bang.
I do not know what bang means,
said the voice.
But why have you killed my Hanau?
Say it was an accident,
muttered Divine to Weston in English.
I've told you before,
replied Weston in the same language.
You don't understand how to deal with natives. One sign of yielding, and they'll be at our throats. The only thing is to intimidate them.
All right, do your stuff then,
growled Divine. He was obviously losing faith in his partner. Weston cleared his throat and again rounded on the elderly Hross.
We kill him,
he shouted.
Show what we can do. Everyone who no do all we say, poof, bang, kill him, same as that one. You do all we say, and we give you much pretty things. See?
To Ransom's intense discomfort, Weston at this point whipped out of his pocket a brightly coloured necklace of beads, the undoubted work of Mr. Woolworth, and began dangling it in front of the faces of his guards, turning round and round, repeating,
Pretty, see?
The result of this maneuver was more striking to Weston himself than he had anticipated. Such a roar of sounds as human ears had never heard before. Baying of Oyarsa, pipping of Piffletriggy, booming of swans, burst out and rent the silence of that august place, waking echoes from the distant mountain walls. Even in the air above them there was a faint ringing of the Eldil voices. It was greatly to Weston's credit that though he paled, he did not lose his nerve.
You no roar at me,
He thundered.
no try to make me afraid. Me no afraid of you.
You must forgive my people.
Said the voice of Oyarsa, and even it was subtly changed.
They are not roaring at you. They are only laughing.
But Weston did not know the Malacandran word for laugh. Indeed, it was not a word he understood very well in any language. Ransom, biting his lips with mortification, almost prayed that one experiment with the beads would satisfy the scientist. But that was because he did not know Weston. The latter saw that the clamour had subsided. He knew that he was following the most orthodox rules for frightening and then conciliating primitive races, and he was not a man to be deterred by one or two failures. The roar that went up from the throats of all the spectators as he began again, revolving like a slow-motion picture of a humming top, occasionally mopping his brow with his left hand and conscientiously jerking the necklace up and down with his right, completely drowned anything he might be attempting to say. But Ransom saw his lips moving and had little doubt that he was working away at
Pretty, pretty.
Then suddenly the sound of laughter almost redoubled in volume. The stars in their courses were fighting against Weston. Some hazy memory of efforts made long ago to entertain an infant niece had begun to penetrate his highly trained mind. He was bobbing up and down from the knees and holding his head onto one side. He was almost dancing, and he was now very hot indeed. For all Ransom knew, he was saying, diddle diddle diddle. It was sheer exhaustion which ended the great physicist's performance, the most successful of its kind ever given on Malacandra, and with it the sonorous raptures of his silence. As silence returned, Ransom heard Divine's voice in English.
For God's sake, stop making a buffoon of yourself, Weston,
It said.
Can't you see it won't work?
It doesn't seem to be working,
Admitted Weston.
but I'm inclined to think they are of less intelligence than we supposed. You think perhaps if I tried it just once again? Or would you like to try this time?
Oh, hell,
Said Divine, and turning his back on his partner, sat down abruptly on the ground, produced his cigarette case, and began to smoke.
I'll give it to the witch doctor,
Said Weston during the moment of silence, which Divine's action had produced among the mystified spectators. Before anyone could stop him, he took a step forward and attempted to drop the string of beads round the elderly Ross's neck. The Ross was, however, too large for the operation, and the necklace merely settled itself on his forehead like a crown, slightly over one eye. It shifted its head a little like a dog worried by flies, snored gently, and resumed its sleep. Oyarsa now addressed Ransom.
Are your fellow creatures hurt in their brains, Ransom of Thandra?
It said.
Or are they too much afraid to answer my questions?
I think, Oyarsa,
Said Ransom.
that they do not believe you are there. And they believe that all these now are like very young cubs. The thicker Haman is trying to frighten them, and then to please them with gifts.
At the sound of Ransom's voice, the two prisoners turned sharply around. Weston was about to speak to Ransom, when Ransom interrupted hastily in English.
Listen, Weston, it's not a trick. There really is a creature there in the middle. There, where you can see a kind of light, or a kind of something, if you look hard. And it is, at least, as intelligent as man.
They seem to live an enormous time. Stop treating it like a child and answer its questions. And if you take my advice, you'll speak the truth and not bluster."
The brutes seem to have intelligence enough to take you in anyway,
growled Weston. But it was in a somewhat modified voice that he turned once more to the sleeping Ross. The desire to wake up the supposed witch doctor was becoming an obsession. He addressed it.
"We sorry we kill him,"
he said, pointing to Huey.
"No go to kill him. Swans tell us bring man. Give him your big head. We got away back into sky. He come."
Here he indicated Ransom.
"With us. He very bent man. Run away. Not do what Swans say like us. We run after him. Get him back for Swans. Want to do what we say. And Swans tell us. See? He not let us. Run away. Run. We run after. See big black one. Think he kill us. We kill him. Poof, bang. All for bent man. He no run away. He be good. We no run after. No kill black one, see? You have bent man. Bent man make all trouble. You plenty keep him. Let us go. He afraid of you. We no afraid. Listen."
At this point, Weston's continual bellowing in the face of the harass at last produced the effect he had striven for so long. The creature opened its eyes and stared mildly at him in some perplexity. Then, gradually realizing the impropriety of which it had been guilty, it rose slowly to its standing position, bowed respectfully to Oyarsa, and finally waded out to the assembly still carrying the necklace draped over its right ear and eye. Weston, his mouth still open, followed the retreating creature with his gaze till it vanished among the stems of the grove. It was Oyarsa who broke the silence.
"We have had mirth enough,"
he said,
"and it is time to hear true answers to our questions. Something is wrong in your head now from Thandra. There is too much blood in it. Is Kakekila here?"
"Here, Oyarsa,"
said a Pfiffeltrig.
"Have you in your cisterns water that has been made cold?"
"Yes, Oyarsa."
"Then let the thick now be taken to the guest house, and let him bathe his head in cold water, much water, and many times. Then bring him again. Meanwhile, I will provide for my killed Rossa."
Weston did not clearly understand what the voice said. Indeed, he was still too busy trying to find out where it came from. But terror smote him as he found himself wrapped in the strong arms of the surrounding Rossa and forced away from his place. Ransom would gladly have shouted out some reassurance, but Weston himself was shouting too loudly to hear him. He was mixing English and Malacandrian now, and the last that was heard was a rising scream of,
"Pay for this! Poof! Bang! Ransom! For God's sake! Ransom! Ransom!"
"And now,"
said Oyarsa, when silence was restored,
"let us honor my dead now."
At his words, 10 of the Rossa grouped themselves about the biers, lifting their heads, and with no signal given, as far as Ransom could see, they began to sing. To every man in his acquaintance with a new art, there comes a moment when that which before them was meaningless, and then it first lifts, as it were, one corner of the curtain that hides its mystery, and reveals in a burst of delight which later and fuller understanding can hardly ever equal, one glimpse of the indefinite possibilities within. For Ransom, this moment had now come in his understanding of Malacandrian song. Now first he saw that its rhythms were based on a different blood from ours, on a heart that beat more quickly and a fiercer internal heat. Through his knowledge of the creatures and his love for them, he began ever so little to hear it with their ears. A sense of great masses moving at visionary speeds, of giants dancing, of eternal sorrows eternally consoled, of he knew not what, and yet what he had always known, awoke within him from the very first bars of the deep-mouthed dirge, and bowed down his spirit as if the gate of heaven had opened before him. "Let it go hence," they sang. "Let it go hence, dissolve, and be no body. Drop it, release it, drop it gently as a stone is loosed from fingers dropping over a still pool. Let it go down, sink, fall away. Once below the surface there are no divisions, no layers in the water yielding all the way down. All one and all unwounded in that element. Send it voyaging. It will not come again. Let it go down. A now rises from it. This is the second life, the other beginning. Open, O colored world, without weight, without shore. You are second and better. This was the first and feeble. Once the worlds were hot within and brought forth life, but only the pale plants, the dark plants. We see their children, when they grow today, out of the sun's light in the sad places, after the heaven made grow another kind of worlds. The high climbers, the bright-haired forests, cheeks of flowers. First were the darker, then the brighter. First the worlds brood, then the suns brood. This was as much of it as he contrived later to remember and could translate. As the song ended, Oyarsa said,
Let us scatter the movements which were their bodies. So will Meladil scatter all worlds, when the first and feeble is worn.
He made a sign to one of the Befifiltrigi, who instantly arose and approached the corpses. The Oyarsa, now singing again but very softly, drew back at least 10 paces. The Befifiltrigi touched each of the 3 dead in turn with some small object that appeared to be made of glass or crystal, and then jumped away with one of his frog-like leaps. Ransom closed his eyes to protect them from a blinding light and felt something like a very strong wind blowing in his face. For a fraction of a second, then all was calm again, and the 3 beers were empty.
God, that would be a trick worth knowing on Earth,
said Divine to Ransom.
Solves the murderer's problem about the disposal of the body, eh?
But Ransom, who was thinking of Hyoy, did not answer him. Before he spoke again, everyone's attention was diverted by the return of the unhappy Weston among his guards. This episode is dedicated to the novel A Golconda Story. Find out more about this novel in the comments section of this video. Your friend and mine, Moon's cat, is hidden somewhere in this video. Did you see him? If you didn't, it's okay. Go back to the start and watch the video again, and when you do see him, write the time code in which he appears in the comments field. And if you get it right, you get the chance to have the next video dedicated to you or someone you care about. He is quick and hard to spot, as you will see in the places he hid here, here, and here. Best of luck finding him. And don't forget,
Look out for the shadows.